Before Miyamoto Musashi became the sword saint of Japan, before his name meant invincibility, he was a hunted child covered in his father's blood, running through burning villages with nothing but rage and his stolen blade. This is not a story about honor. This is a story about a man who killed over 60 warriors in single combat, who wrote his philosophy in a cave while waiting to die, and who understood that the greatest battle is not against an enemy, it's against yourself. What you're about to hear will shatter everything you think you know about samurai, about war, and about what it truly costs to become undefeatable. Segment 1. Before the legend, life in the shadows. The year is 1584, and Japan is tearing itself apart. For over a century, the island nation has been consumed by the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states. There is no unified Japan. There is only blood, ambition, and the constant thunder of armies clashing across rice fields and mountain passes. Villages burn weekly. Children learn to recognize the smell of death before they learn to write. Samurai are not elegant poets in silk. They are mud-covered killers who sleep with their swords and wake to the screams of the wounded. In the village of Miyamoto, in Harima Province, the ground is frozen. Winter bites through thin walls. Families huddle around dying fires, stretching meals of millet and radish across days. The sound of distant war drums echoes through the valleys like the heartbeat of a dying god. Here, in this forgotten corner of a fractured nation, a boy is born. They name him Benisuk. His father, Munisai, is a master swordsman, a man whose name carries weight in the province. But weight is not wealth. Munisai teaches the jit, a weapon for disarming blades, and he serves the Shinmen clan, minor lords clinging to power in a world where loyalty shifts like river water. Munisai is respected, but respect doesn't fill bellies. The household is austere, cold, disciplined to the point of cruelty. Benisuk's mother disappears from the records. Some say she died in childbirth. Others whisper she abandoned the family, unable to bear Munisai's harshness. The boy grows up in silence, in the shadow of a father who speaks more with his fists than his words. The training begins before dawn, always before dawn. The crack of wooden swords echoes through morning mist. Benisuk's hands blister, bleed, callous over. He learns to move before thinking, to breathe through pain, to see the world as a series of angles and vulnerabilities. His father is merciless. A wrong stance earns a strike to the ribs. A slow reaction, a blow to the head. There is no praise, only correction, only the endless repetition of forms until muscle remembers what mind forgets. But Munisai is not just harsh, he is haunted. He has killed men, many men. He has seen friends cut down, watched lords betray each other for a few more fields of rice. He knows that in this age, skill is survival, and survival is everything. So he beats excellence into his son because love, in this world, is preparation for death. Benisuk is not like other children. He is too intense, too quiet, too filled with something that burns without making sound. The other village boys fear him. He fights them with a savagery that disturbs even the adults. At 7, he breaks another boy's arm in a quarrel. At 9, he beats a teenager senseless with a stick. There is something wrong with him, the villagers whisper. Something hungry. The village itself is a place of ghosts. Soldiers pass through, conscripting men who never return. Ronin, masterless samurai, wander the roads, dangerous and desperate. Bandits hide in the forests. Every stranger could be death. Every night, families bar their doors and pray to ancestors for protection. Benisuk learns to move through this world like smoke. He watches everything. The way soldiers walk, the way merchants hide their coin, the way farmers grip their tools like weapons when strangers approach. He begins to understand that the world is not divided into good and evil, only into the quick and the dead. At 13, his father dies. The records are unclear. Some say illness. Others hint at a duel gone wrong, or an assassination by a rival school. What is certain is this: Benisuk becomes alone. Alone in a country at war. Alone with skills that are dangerous but unproven. Alone with a hunger that has no name. He takes his father's sword. He leaves the village. He does not look back. The roads of Japan in 1596 are arteries of chaos. Armies march. Refugees flee. The boy who was Binosuk walks through this hell with nothing but a blade and a growing certainty that ordinary life is not meant for him. He sleeps in forests. He eats what he can steal or catch. He watches warriors train and learns from their movements like a wolf studying a pack. Somewhere in those cold, hungry years, Binosuk makes a decision. Not a conscious choice, but a transformation written in blood and dirt, and endless midnight hours staring at stars through bare tree branches. He will become stronger than fear itself. He will become undefeatable, not because he wants glory, not because he dreams of honor, but because in a world that devours the weak, there is no other choice. The boy's name was Binosuk, but the world will know him as Musashi, and the killing is about to begin. Segment 2, Rise of the Warrior, The Path to Glory. The transformation from Binosuk to Musashi begins with a lie. In 1600, at 17 years old, the young warrior talks his way into the army of Yukita Hideai, fighting for the Western Coalition at Sekigahara, the battle that will determine Japan's future. He is too young, too poor, too unknown. But he lies about his experience, and in an army of thousands, one more sword goes unquestioned. Sekigahara is slaughter on a scale the boy has never imagined. 80,000 warriors collide in a single valley. The noise is inhuman, the roar of men screaming, dying, killing. The ground turns to mud mixed with blood. Horses scream. Banners fall. Entire units are erased in minutes. Musashi fights. Not with grace. Not with honor. He fights like a cornered animal, swinging his sword with raw desperation and shocking strength. He kills men whose faces he never sees clearly. He survives by instinct, by luck, by a ferocity that surprises even him. And then the Western Coalition loses. Tokugawa Ieyasu's forces crush the opposition. The survivors scatter. Musashi runs. He spends weeks hiding in forests and temples, hunted as a defeated soldier. He should be dead, but he isn't. And in those weeks of running, something crystallizes in his mind. Survival is not enough. He did not survive to hide. He survived to become something greater. So begins the Musha Shugyo, the warrior's pilgrimage. Musashi travels Japan challenging dojo after dojo, school after school, master after master. This is not romantic. This is brutal, desperate self-testing. Each duel is a gamble with death. Each victory or defeat reshapes him. His first recorded duel is against Arima Kihei, a renowned warrior of the Shinto-ryu school. Musashi is 16, some accounts say 13. He uses a bakken, a wooden sword. The fight is savage and quick. Musashi strikes with unexpected speed and overwhelming power. Arima falls, his skull fractured. He dies from his injuries. Musashi walks away. He does not celebrate. He does not mourn. He has learned something about timing, about the moment between thought and action. The duels continue. Akiyama, Tadaima, Muzo Ganasuk. Names piling up like stones on a grave. Musashi develops his style through necessity, not tradition. He uses whatever works. Wooden swords, real swords, later 2 swords at once, breaking every convention of proper samurai technique. The schools hate him. He represents everything wrong with the era, a wanderer with no master, no lineage, no respect for tradition. He fights dirty when necessary. He arrives late to throw opponents off balance. He uses the sun, the terrain, psychological warfare. Honor, he learns, is something you can afford only after you've won. At 21, Musashi arrives in Kyoto, the cultural heart of Japan. Here lives the Yoshioka clan, the most prestigious sword school in the nation, teachers to shoguns, masters of elegant technique. They are everything Musashi is not. Refined, connected, respected. Musashi challenges them. Not once. 3 times. The first duel is against Yoshioka Kojiro, the school's head. They meet at dawn outside the city. Musashi arrives late, hours late, infuriating Kojiro. When Musashi finally appears, the duel is over in one exchange. Musashi strikes with a wooden sword he carved from an oar. Kojiro is crippled, his arm shattered, his reputation destroyed. The second duel is against Kojiro's younger brother, Denshikiro. Again, Musashi arrives late. Again, the fight ends in seconds. Denshikiro dies from his wounds. The third duel is an ambush. The Yoshioka clan, humiliated and desperate, sets a trap. They lure Musashi to a field outside Kyoto with the promise of facing the young heir, Yoshioka Matashikuro, a child used as bait. But hidden in the trees are dozens of Yoshioka retainers with swords, bows, and rifles. Musashi knows it's a trap. He comes anyway. What follows is not a duel, but a massacre. Musashi moves through the ambush like a demon, wielding 2 swords, cutting down samurai with terrifying efficiency. He kills the boy Matashikuro, then fights his way through the retainers. The Yoshioka school is annihilated, its reputation shattered forever. Musashi disappears into the night, now truly hunted, truly alone, and truly unstoppable. Over the next decades, he refines his technique into something unique. Niten Ichi-ryu, the school of 2 heavens as one. He wields a long sword and a short sword simultaneously, using both hands independently, breaking centuries of single-sword tradition. It is not beautiful. It is devastatingly effective. He fights in battles, serves lords briefly, then leaves before being tied down. He never joins a clan permanently. He remains Ronin, masterless, because to serve would mean to compromise, and Musashi has learned that his path is solitary. By his 30s, he is known throughout Japan, not as a hero, as something more unsettling, a weapon in human form. A man who has turned killing into an art and survival into a philosophy. But fame brings new dangers. And the most famous duel of all is still to come. In 1612, on a small island between Honshu and Kyushu, Musashi faces Sasaki Kojiro, perhaps the only swordsman in Japan considered his equal. Kojiro is everything Musashi is not: elegant, refined, serving a powerful lord. His technique is legendary, the swallow cut. A strike so fast and precise it can cut a bird in flight. His sword, the Manahoshi Zeo, is impossibly long, over 3 feet of blade, requiring perfect control. The duel is set for dawn on Ganryu Island. Musashi arrives 4 hours late. Kojiro, furious and unbalanced, is exactly where Musashi wants him. Musashi steps off the boat carrying not a sword but a wooden blade he carved from the boats or during the journey. He has left his real swords behind. This is psychological warfare at its peak. The duel lasts seconds. Kojiro attacks with his legendary speed. But Musashi has already moved, already closed the distance, already struck. The wooden sword crushes Kojiro's skull. The master swordsman falls. Musashi does not wait to confirm the kill. He runs to the boat and escapes, knowing Kojiro's students will seek revenge. Later, stories say Kojiro's sword cut through Musashi's headband, missing his skull by inches. Others say Musashi bowed to the corpse, showing respect to a worthy opponent. Still others claim he kicked the body to make sure Kojiro was dead. The truth is lost, but the legend is born. Miyamoto Musashi, the sword saint, the man who never lost, the Ronin who defeated Japan's greatest warriors and lived to become old. But victory is only the beginning of understanding. And Musashi's journey is far from over. Segment 3. Myths, Secrets, and Unsolved Mysteries. As Musashi's legend spreads across Japan, something stranger begins to happen. The man starts to fade, and the myth takes over. There is a story, whispered in the old ryokan inns and temple courtyards, that Musashi once fought not with steel, but with spirit. The tale goes that in a remote mountain village, a demon haunted the path to a sacred shrine. Villagers had seen it, a creature with twisted horns and eyes like burning coals. 3 samurai went to confront it. None returned. Musashi, passing through, heard the story and walked up the mountain alone at dusk. He carried no sword. When dawn came, he descended. The demon was gone. Musashi never spoke of what happened. Some say he outwitted a yokai through Zen clarity of mind. Others believe he killed a rabid bear or a bandit in Oni mask. Still others insist the demon bowed to Musashi, recognizing a creature even more dangerous than itself. This is the nature of Musashi, where history ends and myth begins. No one can say for certain. What we do know is that after the duel with Kojiro, Musashi changed. He stopped accepting challenges. He stopped killing. He turned inward, seeking something deeper than victory. He begins studying other arts: calligraphy, painting, sculpture, tea ceremony. His brushwork is bold, rough, but filled with unexpected power. His paintings of birds and landscapes carry a fierce simplicity. He carves Buddhist statues from wood, each one capturing the essence of enlightenment through imperfection. Why? What drives a killer to become an artist? The answer may lie in the contradiction at the heart of Musashi's philosophy. In his later writings, he describes the way of strategy, not as a method of killing, but as a path to understanding the true nature of existence. Combat, he insists, is merely the most honest mirror. It reflects truth without deception. In the moment before blades meet, there is no room for lies, no space for illusion, only reality. But there is a mystery that haunts Musashi's middle years, a gap in the historical record that has never been satisfactorily explained. Between 1614 and 1615, during the siege of Osaka, one of the final great battles of the unification period, Musashi should have fought. By all accounts, he was hired by the Tokugawa to join their forces. He was present at the castle. Yet there is no record of him participating in combat. No stories of his blade flashing through enemy ranks. Nothing. Some historians suggest he was ill. Others propose he had a crisis of conscience, unwilling to participate in what he saw as a pointless slaughter. A more intriguing theory suggests Musashi was involved in espionage or assassination, missions that would have been erased from official records. But there is another possibility, one that emerges from scattered temple accounts and local legends. During the winter of 1614, a ronin matching Musashi's description stayed at a remote Zen monastery in the mountains north of Osaka. The monks recorded that this warrior meditated for days without moving, barely eating, as if wrestling with demons invisible to others. One monk wrote that the ronin spoke to himself in the night, arguing with ghosts, reliving battles, weeping. Was Musashi suffering from what we would now call post-traumatic stress? Had the weight of 60-some deaths finally caught up to him? Or was this something else, a spiritual crisis, a confrontation with the emptiness that lies beyond victory? Japanese Buddhism, particularly Zen, teaches that attachment to outcome is the source of suffering. For a warrior whose entire identity is built on winning, this teaching is poison and medicine at once. To become truly undefeatable, Musashi would have to defeat his own need to win. He would have to let go of Musashi himself. The monastery records end abruptly. The ronin disappeared. Whether this was Musashi and what revelation he experienced remains unknown. What we do know is that after this period, Musashi's writings take on a different tone. Less aggressive, more contemplative. He begins to speak of winning without fighting, of understanding the opponent so completely that the duel becomes unnecessary. Then there are the artifacts, objects that blur the line between history and magic. In the Matsui Bunko Museum in Kumamoto, there is a wooden sword said to be the weapon Musashi used against Kojiro. It is rough, asymmetrical, still bearing the marks of hasty carving. When you stand before it, it doesn't look like a legendary weapon. It looks like driftwood. But analysis shows something remarkable. The wood is white oak, exceptionally dense and hard. The weight distribution is perfect for Musashi's two-handed technique. And there are microscopic traces of what appears to be blood in the grain. In private collections throughout Japan, there are paintings and calligraphy scrolls bearing Musashi's seal. Some are authenticated, others are disputed. But the most controversial piece is a scroll held by a temple in Kyushu, a painting of a single circle, the Zen Enso, symbol of enlightenment and the void. The brushstroke is violent, almost angry. The circle is incomplete. There is a gap at the top, as if the artist's hand stopped before closing the form. Beneath it, in Musashi's hand, a single phrase, "The way is in training." What does the incomplete circle mean? Some see it as Musashi acknowledging his journey was unfinished. Others interpret it as a deliberate teaching, that perfection is not closure but constant becoming. A few believe Musashi was interrupted mid-stroke, perhaps by a coughing fit or a vision, and the incompleteness is accidental. But there is another interpretation, one that emerges from Musashi's own later writings. In the Book of Five Rings, he discusses the concept of emptiness, the state of mind without thought, without fear, without desire. Perhaps the gap in the circle represents this emptiness, the space where the self dissolves and only action remains. Beyond the artifacts, there are the prophecies. In his 50s, Musashi began to attract students, though he never formally opened a school. Those who trained with him reported strange occurrences. A student named Tereo Maganojo wrote that Musashi would sometimes stop mid-lesson and stare into the distance, as if watching something no one else could see. Once, he announced that a fire would consume the western district of Kumamoto in 3 days. It did. Was this intuition refined to an inhuman degree, or something closer to what ancient cultures called second sight? In 1643, knowing death was near, Musashi retreated to a cave called Ryugando, the Cave of Spirits, outside Kumamoto. For weeks, he sat in darkness, fasting, meditating, and writing what would become his final work, the Dakoto, or the Path of Aloneness, 21 precepts for living as a warrior. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Do not, under any circumstances, depend on a partial feeling. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. These are not the words of a man obsessed with victory. They are the words of someone who has seen through victory to what lies beyond, the silence where the self ends and the universe begins. On the 19th of May, 1645, Musashi died. He was 62 years old. He had lived longer than almost any warrior of his era, undefeated in over 60 duels, architect of a philosophy that would influence Japan for centuries. But before he died, he did something inexplicable. He gave his final instructions to his students, passed on his scrolls and teachings, and then asked to be left alone. When they returned at dawn, Musashi was in the zazen position, seated in meditation, eyes open, facing the cave entrance. He was dead, but his eyes were open. In Buddhist tradition, dying in meditation with open eyes is a sign of achieving enlightenment, of dying fully awake, without fear or attachment. But there is a local legend, recorded by only one source, that claims something else. The legend says that when the students entered, there was a second figure in the cave, a man in ancient armor, seated across from Musashi, also in meditation, also dead. Or perhaps not dead, perhaps only fading, dissolving like morning mist. Who was this figure? A guardian spirit? A final opponent in the realm between life and death? The legend provides no answer, and mainstream history ignores the story entirely. Yet in the centuries since, martial artists and pilgrims still visit Ryugando Cave. They sit where Musashi sat, and some report feeling a presence, not threatening, but vast, like standing at the edge of an ocean at night. Miyamoto Musashi defeated every opponent he faced in life. But the greatest duel, the one against death itself, against emptiness, against the dissolution of self, left no witnesses. Only questions, and a gap in a circle forever unclosed. Segment 4. Power, Glory, and the World They Left Behind. While Musashi lived as a ronin, masterless, landless, wandering, the Japan around him was transforming into something he would barely recognize. The Tokugawa shogunate, having unified the country through blood and cunning, now turned its attention to control. Not just control of land or armies, but control of ideas, control of identity itself. The Tokugawa rulers understood something fundamental. Warriors are dangerous when they have nothing to lose. So they gave the samurai something to lose. They gave them stipends, positions, bureaucratic ranks. They turned killers into administrators, swordsmen into clerks. The samurai class became a hereditary aristocracy, their swords ceremonial, their greatest battles fought with paperwork. In the great castles of Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto, the elite lived lives Musashi would have found incomprehensible. Daimyo, feudal lords, presided over courts of elaborate ritual. Tea ceremonies lasted hours, each gesture prescribed by tradition. Kimono patterns indicated rank and allegiance. Speaking out of turn could cost a man his position, his family's honor, even his life. Samurai in this new era trained not for war, but for form. Kata, prescribed movements, replaced battlefield improvisation. Dueling was outlawed. The emphasis shifted to aesthetics, to preserving tradition, to never being tested. Musashi, had he lived another generation, would have been an embarrassment to this new order. A reminder of the chaos before. A man whose scars and rough manner contradicted the elegant fiction the Tokugawa were constructing. But the elite needed heroes. They just needed those heroes to be safely dead. So they began to reshape Musashi's legacy. In the decades after his death, stories about him multiplied. Some were true. Many were embellished. A few were invented from whole cloth. He became the sword saint, Kinsei, a title that implied not just skill but spiritual purity. His roughness was sanded down, his violence made noble, his solitude recast as aesthetic choice rather than social rejection. The elite commission plays about him. Woodblock prints. Poems. Each version refined the myth, making Musashi less human and more symbol. He became what the ruling class wanted warriors to be: devoted, disciplined, ultimately subservient to a higher order. Meanwhile, his actual teachings, raw, practical, sometimes brutal, were studied in secret by those who understood what real combat required. This tension, between Musashi the symbol and Musashi the man, defined his legacy for centuries. In the Tokugawa period, the greatest swordsmen were often those who never fought. They became teachers at established schools, serving daimyo, living comfortable lives behind castle walls. They wrote treatises. They performed demonstrations for lords who had never seen real combat. The most successful schools emphasized lineage, proper technique, and spiritual development. They taught that mastery came from discipline, from repeating the forms passed down by masters who learned from masters stretching back generations. Musashi would have laughed at this. His philosophy was simpler, harsher. Study strategy over the years and achieve the spirit of the warrior. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. But there was no place for such thinking in the New Japan. The country was at peace. The Pax Tokugawa would last over 250 years. Generations of samurai lived and died without ever drawing their swords in anger. The way of the warrior became nostalgia, performance, philosophy divorced from practice. Yet Musashi's influence persisted, like water finding cracks in stone. His Book of Five Rings, written in that cave while dying, became a secret text among certain martial lineages. It was too direct, too practical for the aesthetic schools. But those who actually wanted to understand combat, who trained not for beauty but for effectiveness, treasured it. The book is strange. It reads like instructions for carpentry as much as combat. Musashi compares strategy to building a house, to steering a ship, to understanding any craft. He insists that the way of the warrior is not separate from ordinary life, but identical to it. In strategy, your spiritual bearing must not be any different from normal. This was revolutionary. Most samurai philosophy of the era treated combat as sacred, separate, requiring special mental states and rituals. Musashi says the opposite. The warrior mind should be your everyday mind. Clarity, not ceremony. Awareness, not altered states. As Japan entered the modern era, the Meiji Restoration of 1868, the abolition of the samurai class, the rapid westernization, Musashi's legend took on new meanings. In the late 19th century, as Japan struggled to define itself against Western powers, Musashi became a symbol of native strength. Here was a Japanese warrior who needed no European tactics, no Western technology, just discipline, strategy, and will. Nationalists embraced him. In the 20th century, during Japan's imperial expansion and the catastrophe of World War II, Musashi was invoked by militarists. His philosophy of victory, they claimed, justified aggression. His emphasis on discipline supported authoritarianism. The incomplete circle of his Enso painting was reinterpreted as the unfinished mission of Japanese dominance. After Japan's defeat in 1945, Musashi's image shifted again. Now he became a symbol of survival, of perseverance through defeat. His Ronin status, masterless, alone, resonated with a nation that had lost its emperor's divinity and its imperial identity. The 1950s and 60s saw an explosion of Musashi content: novels, films, manga. Eiji Yoshikawa's fictional biography became a bestseller, portraying Musashi as a seeker of truth through the sword. Kurosawa-inspired samurai films featured Ronin heroes clearly modeled on Musashi's legend. By the late 20th century, Musashi had gone global. The Book of Five Rings was translated and marketed to businessmen as a strategy guide. Corporate executives read Musashi alongside Sun Tzu, applying warrior philosophy to markets and management. The irony would have delighted him or disgusted him, perhaps both. Today, statues of Musashi stand throughout Japan. In Kumamoto, a massive bronze figure guards a park, two swords raised. In Okayama, his birthplace, a museum preserves artifacts and promotes local tourism. In countless dojos worldwide, students train in Niten Ichi-ryu, believing they practice Musashi's technique. But what would Musashi make of this legacy? The man who rejected all schools founded a school. The man who avoided serving lords is now invoked by corporate warriors. The man who painted that incomplete circle has been completed, explained, commodified. There is a moment in the Book of Five Rings where Musashi writes, "Do nothing which is of no use." It's one of the shortest precepts and one of the most challenging. What does it mean in a world where everything has been made useful? Every story, every philosophy, every symbol extracted for meaning and purpose. Perhaps it means this, that the truest part of Musashi is what cannot be used. The silence in the cave, the gap in the circle, the moment between opponents when nothing exists but awareness. In Ryugando Cave, where Musashi died, visitors still leave offerings. Flowers, incense, folded paper cranes. The cave is small, damp, barely large enough to sit in comfortably. Sunlight enters only at certain hours, painting the rock walls with shifting patterns. If you sit there long enough, as pilgrims do, the sounds of the modern world fade. No cars, no phones, just wind in bamboo, water over stone, the occasional cry of a bird. And if you sit longer still, you might understand what Musashi understood in his final days. That victory is an illusion, that the self is a fiction, that the only true opponent is the voice in your head that believes it needs to win. The Sword Saint defeated 60-some warriors and lived to become old. But his final victory was learning that victory itself means nothing. Japan built monuments to the warrior. But Musashi already built his own monument, not in bronze or stone, but in the minds of everyone who has ever faced something terrifying and decided to move forward anyway. Not because they were brave, not because they wanted glory, but because there was simply no other way to be alive. That is the real legacy, not the duels or the legends, not the books or the schools, but the simple, terrifying instruction. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. In a culture obsessed with honor, Musashi taught humility. In an age of ceremony, he taught directness. In a society built on hierarchy, he remained outside, alone, answerable only to the way he forged for himself. The Tokugawa shogunate fell. The samurai class was abolished. Imperial Japan rose and collapsed. Modern Japan emerged from the ashes. Through all these transformations, Musashi remained, not as he was, but as he needed to be for each generation. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all. Not to be remembered accurately, but to be remembered usefully. To become not a man but a mirror, reflecting back to each age what it needs to see. Somewhere in Kumamoto, in a museum case, there is a rough wooden sword. It killed one of Japan's greatest warriors. It is not beautiful. It is not elegant. It is simply what it needed to be. Like its maker. Like all of us, when we stop pretending and start living. The circle remains incomplete. The cave waits in silence. And the path, as Musashi wrote in his final precept, continues. Do not regret what you have done. Not because you were right, but because regret changes nothing. Only the next step matters. Only the present moment. Only the space between breaths, where the self dissolves and something larger takes over. This is the way Musashi walked. This is the legacy he left. Not answers, but a path. Not certainty, but the courage to step forward into emptiness. And if that sounds like death, then perhaps you're beginning to understand what he was teaching all along. That life and death are not opposites. They are the same breath, the same stroke of the brush, the same gap in the circle. And in that gap, everything and nothing waits, including you.